Greetings to everyone. We review maps, analyze advancements, draw conclusions, and make forecasts about how events may develop further. Therefore, make sure to subscribe to my channel to stay updated on the latest developments. So yesterday's main news was, of course, the missile strikes on Ukrainian territory carried out by Russia. These strikes were the most massive in 3 months, involving 120 missiles and 90 drones. However, even bigger news came later at night. Reports that the US has allowed Ukraine to use long-range missiles against Russian territory. Share your opinions in the comments. Will this affect the upcoming negotiations? Will it derail them, or are we still expecting negotiations in January? Now let's move on to the frontline situation. Today we'll discuss the situation in the city of Kupiansk. Essentially, Ukraine is currently losing this city. I'll give you a detailed overview of what's happening there and also touch on the 2-kilometer breakthrough achieved by Russian forces in the Selydove-Kurakhove direction. Let's get started by opening the map to examine the current situation. Here is the city on the map. Remember how for many days even the popular Ukrainian blogger Arestovich claimed that Russian troops had been driven out of the area and destroyed. Many Russian Telegram channels even picked up on this narrative. However, I immediately provided accurate and truthful information. So initially, Russian forces entered Kupiansk from Lyman Pershai, advancing into the northern part of left bank Kupiansk. Let me clarify right away. The situation has always been and remains about the left bank part of the city, as there is no connection with the right bank. As you can see, all the bridges have been destroyed and any makeshift crossings are immediately targeted. Therefore, the battle is currently focused on the left side of the city. As I mentioned earlier, Russian control initially extended only to the area around Nekrasova Street and the adjacent streets. Ukrainian armed forces made significant efforts to immediately dislodge the Russian units, even pulling reserves from nearby villages to assist. As with any breakthrough, the first 24 hours are critical. It's during this period that either the breakthrough is neutralized, blocked, or nothing works. In this case, Ukrainian forces failed to dislodge the Russians. On the contrary, the Russian command acted swiftly, reinforcing their positions with reserves and expanding their controlled territory through small offensives. For example, during battles in the Zaozkolye neighborhood, the feed mill was captured. Here's where it is on the map. Using this as a base, Russian forces launched an offensive southward towards the Kupiansk-Svatove highway. Within the first days, this road was brought under fire control, and as you can now see on the map, it is fully under physical control by Russian forces. In addition to the feed mill, 2 more factories, the cannery and the dairy plant, were captured during the assault. These are located here and here. As a result, the main strongholds in left bank Kupiansk are now under Russian control. From the cannery and dairy plant, the offensive has progressed westward towards the river and northward. The primary focus of the Russian army is now on clearing out the western and northern districts. Considering their advance to the Kupiansk-Svatove highway to the south, we're essentially talking about 80% control over the left bank part of Kupiansk. It's also important to note that the Ukrainian armed forces are in a dire situation here. They are trapped on the left bank with limited options for retreat. Their only possible exit is via crossings in Kupiansk-Vuzlovyi. But even these routes are under constant drone surveillance by Russia. In summary, the situation for the Ukrainian armed forces here is catastrophic, while for Russian forces, the opposite is true. Essentially, Ukraine is losing the city of Kupiansk, or at least its left bank part. Now, let's move on to the breakthrough on the Selydove-Kurakhove direction, where Russian forces advanced 2 kilometers and reached the settlement of Pushkina. Now let's return to the Selydove-Kurakhove direction. Here's the situation. The Ukrainian armed forces are continuing to defend Sontsevka with all available resources. The reason is clear. Once this settlement falls, a direct route opens to the south, leading to Starye Terny and the Kurakhove Reservoir Dam. That's why they are holding their ground here at all costs. However, alongside the assault on Sontsevka, Russian forces are advancing on Starye Terny from the east, from the area of Berezki, most of which is already under Russian control. Consequently, Ukraine's hold on Sontsevka will soon lose its strategic significance. But the most interesting developments occurred farther north. Here, Russian forces are attempting to establish favorable conditions for a future push toward Yasenevo. Why is this significant? Allow me to explain. This area hosts the last paved road connecting the Kurakhove grouping of Ukrainian forces with their Pokrovsk grouping. While this road is already under attack by Russian drones, there's a big difference between targeting it with FPV drones and physically severing it. Achieving this is the goal. This is why, yesterday, Russian forces made a 2-kilometer advance toward the settlement of Pushkino. As for what happens next, there's only one likely scenario. After Pushkino, the offensive will continue toward Ukrainka, and then, from there, directly to Yasenevo. An interesting note here is that Yasenevo is only 12 kilometers away from the Dnipropetrovsk region, southern Kurakhove direction. Yesterday, the degradation of a semi-encirclement became evident, where Russian forces have trapped part of Ukraine's 79th Brigade. The walls of this semi-encirclement have softened and begun yielding to our attacks from both the north and the south. The primary battles yesterday took place between Trudov and Uspanovka, as well as near Dalnai, where we managed to push the front by a few hundred meters. However, the most significant progress, in terms of territory, occurred on the northern wall of the encirclement. Here, Russian units carried out 2 splitting strikes, forcing Ukrainian forces to retreat from the heights to the next line of tree plantations. This has drastically worsened the situation for the remaining Ukrainian grouping in this pocket. Ideally, the Ukrainian command should have withdrawn its troops from this area long ago. Now, any withdrawal will have to happen under fire, inevitably resulting in losses. This offensive had been anticipated for a long time, on both sides of the front. After prolonged preparations, including strikes on enemy positions and rear areas with aviation and artillery, it finally began yesterday. On the very first day, the Russian army achieved success on multiple fronts. 1. From Nesteryanka to Novoandreevka, this is a clearly advantageous position, threatening not only Orikhiv from the west, via the heights, but also the Ukrainian grouping near the Dnipro, in the Kupiansk-Stepnohirsk area. 2. Toward Novodanilivka. The goal here is to pin down Ukrainian forces and pose a direct threat to Orikhiv. 3. Toward Bilohirya. Yesterday, Russian forces advanced to the eastern and southern outskirts of this settlement. This is another logical direction if the aim is to envelop Orikhiv from both sides via the heights, west and east. To summarize, tactical successes were achieved on all these fronts yesterday. Whether we can turn these into operational tactical gains remains to be seen in the coming days. Also, today footage emerged online showing the objective control of the destruction of an American HIMARS system. Such footage rarely appears on the internet, as these systems hold significant value for Ukraine due to the limited number provided by the United States. Each loss of this equipment is a serious problem for Ukrainian forces.